Hey, my name's John, and I'm a human doing. And what am I doing today? I'm building a subwoofer cabinet for an 18-inch Wolfram audio subwoofer. The 8-inch subwoofer that I built in the last video, that turned out fairly well, and I had a few people ask if I could build subwoofer cabinets for them. I said, yeah, absolutely. That's something I have a lot of fun doing. So if you do like subwoofer cabinets, by all means, like and subscribe. You're going to see a couple of those projects coming forward, including the one you're about to watch. So again, like, subscribe, ask questions down below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Thanks very much. Here we go. As mentioned, this is Wolfram Audio 18-inch. It is actually the HG18. It's a dual 4-ohm. And here's a quick shot of the final cabinet when it's all done. And like most projects, you're going to start off by taking down your 4x8 sheets. In this case, it's 3/4 inch MDF. Keep in mind, MDF is not 4x8. You actually get an extra inch length of width, so 49 and 97. So again, I'm cutting to width. If you don't have a table saw, I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. By all means, have the big box stores, cut this stuff down for you. Just bring your cut list and they'll cut it down for you, no problem. So that's certainly an option. Now I cut everything to width with a table saw, and I'm cutting it to length, but I'm using a cross-cut sled, as you can see here. Just makes things easier and it keeps things nice and square. But some pieces are too long for that, so I have to use a track saw. Track saw is an awesome alternative for a table saw. If you can't have both, or if you just don't have room for a table saw, track saws they're a lifesaver, so they're awesome. So once the pieces are all cut, I can start assembly. And I am assembling using just standard carpenter's glue, nothing fancy. You don't have to use anything special when it comes to assembly. The glue is actually going to be stronger than the wood in most cases. This is a butt joint, but I'll be reinforcing it. And when it comes to the sort of fastening of it, I'm just using brad nails. So 18 gauge, 1.25 inch, 1.5 depending on which part of the box I'm using or building. But you don't have to use screws. If you don't have an air compressor, by all means use screws. But I find screws take longer, and they really don't give you a stronger finished product. I mean, the glue is going to do the bulk of the work. So if you have a nailer, by all means use it. I wouldn't bother with screws. I mean, unless you feel better with screws. I mean, hey, screw it. So here you can see me assembling the carcass. I've actually run out of nails, but I haven't noticed yet. So, but I will notice it, and I will go back and re-nail most of this. So I assemble the carcass, and then I assemble the front baffle last. I'm using a single flute cutter for MDF. I do find single flute cutters are nicest for MDF because they make the dust particles larger. But that's sort of an aside. By all means, ask me questions below if you have any. And I'm using just a really basic MDF router jig to cut the circles. Again, if you have questions on how to make one of those, they're super duper simple. And if you build boxes, you definitely want to have something like this. But say 2, maybe 3 passes at most, and you'll cut all the way through 3/4 inch MDF. I mean, these cutters, they treat MDF like butter. So once that's cut, you're going to see me cutting here. And if you watch my 8-inch subwoofer build, you'll notice that I did curved a port or flared port. So I'm doing the same thing on this. So I'm not going to repeat the steps, or at least I'm not going to show you as much detail. But I started out, so I cut all those curves, and then I'm using a radius. In this case, I'm using the same radius as the cutout for the subwoofer. And I'm doing that because I wanted a really large flared port for this. It was primarily for aesthetics, I'll be honest. You could say there's some acoustical advantages, but I did it for aesthetics. I couldn't see any, nor did I measure any differences in the end, so it really is aesthetic, but it does look pretty cool. And again, if you saw the 8-inch build, it's the exact same process. So I make one. So this is the jig that the form is going to be wrapped on, and then I just copy it twice. So you make it once, sort of, and then you just copy it. And this is the center portion. I'm making a lot of dust, it's true. And yes, I need better dust collection. I don't even have dust collection connected here, but I will at one point build better dust collection for my shop. But I haven't done it yet. So this is the center brace. You'll see that a little later on. But that's what it looks like when it's all finished up. And this is with all the kerf pieces cut. And it's already been filled with PL Premium. I use PL because it dries relatively strong. I mean, if you use wood glue, it doesn't give you the same result. I put way too many kerfs in this, but it was already set up for the 8-inch box. And me being lazy, sometimes I put too many kerfs. You don't have to put anywhere near this many. But again, the process, similar to that 8-inch box, I'm putting my 2 I'll call them forms or jigs. And then here comes I'll call it the magical part. So I'm going to fold it, and I'm going to take it nice and slow, because I did put so many cuts in it that it does make it a little bit brittle, at least until that PL Premium dries. So I'm just folding it up, and that's going to give us the radius for the flared port. So once I got that folded all the way up, I actually pulled the box, or not the box, but the baffle down, and I just used a clamp to hold it so that I had time to nail. And you can see here when it's all assembled, you can see that center brace that I made earlier. And the clamp is just there, and I just gave it a few hours to sort of set before I went ahead and did any more. But while that was happening, I started on the remainder of the port. So that's the beginning of the port, and this is actually the sort of the opening on the inside of the box. So I doubled up the MDF on the one edge, and that just allowed me to put a radius on both sides, a slightly larger radius than I would have been able to had I just used straight MDF 3/4 inch. So this just doubled it up, and that's, my hope is that when you put the radius on this, it's just a little bit less resistance for the airflow. Again, I've never measured the difference, but it makes me feel better. So you should probably do it too. It makes you feel better. Once that's cut, you can see here the finished, I'll call it the finished product, so it's radiused on both sides. I'm hoping that's a little better than a single, just the 3/4 inch rounded on one edge. So I'm just assembling that whole port that I just finished making onto the front baffle. The front baffle and port are one piece. Oftentimes if you're painting the box, which I'm not unfortunately, but it does look a lot nicer when the front baffle and the port are one piece. So you didn't see me, what I'm doing here, you didn't see me earlier. I cut the front baffle. It's two pieces, sorry, two layers. The first layer is the outside diameter. You saw me cut that hole. That's the outside diameter of the subwoofer. But the second layer is the mounting hole. So it's what the subwoofer is going to mount onto, and it will also allow the subwoofer to be recessed by 3/4 of an inch. I always find recessed looks a little bit nicer. Again, it's just a cosmetic thing. But you can see the finished front baffle / port assembly, and it actually reminds me kind of like a soapbox race car, maybe a bobsled. So it's definitely a unique look. It does make it easy to assemble because that just slides right into the carcass, and you're essentially done. But before I'm finished, and while the glue is drying on that front baffle, I'm going to make some wedges, or I mentioned on the 8-inch box, I call these squeak blocks. Just, that's what I call them. That I think they're just really just wedges. But you can see how I'm cutting them. I set the table saw up to 45 degrees, and then I just flip the board back and forth. I'm not trying to be exact on this. I'm just cutting them because they're really just for reinforcement. Because we're using butt joints, you really ideally don't want to use butt joints on a subwoofer cabinet unless it's reinforced with something, because you want more glue surface area. And one of them, or actually two of them in this case actually, I'm using a larger wedge because it's part of the port. And you don't want to have a square edge on the port if you can help it. I mean, it's actually, if you measure it, you're trying to measure it so you're maintaining your port width all along the length, unless you're doing a tapered horn or something, in which case then that's a whole different ball of wax. We can talk about that later. We can do folded horns. But for now, I'm just assembling these wedge pieces. This one here is actually right underneath or on the same side as the subwoofer, so this one is not critical. That the size isn't important. I just wanted something with a little bit more girth to it on this side, and you can see what some of the assembly looks like. So I'm using, so there's one of those corner pieces, and then just the squeak blocks that go up. They don't go all the way to the top of the box because that's part of the port, and I just didn't feel comfortable putting it in the port area. It probably wouldn't make any difference, but I decided against it. But you can see what the squeak blocks or the reinforcements look like. And here is basically the assembled cabinet, but I had one more brace that I want to put in it, and that's just a dowel brace. So that has been cut and is assembled and then screwed in. This is one place I did use screws. I thought it made more sense. So I'm using a 4-inch. It's really just a deck screw. It's a fairly heavy duty one. But you can see again the reinforcements inside there. That will make the box a fair bit stronger. There aren't a lot of braces in this box, but it's not an SPL box, so I'm not overly concerned with that. So the only thing remaining is to fasten the subwoofer down, and I'm doing that with T-nuts. I suggest you use T-nuts rather than just screwing your subwoofers in. It's just going to give you more longevity. The box will last longer. MDF is just not designed for that sort of thing, so you definitely want to use T-nuts. And as you can see here, just in case you don't know what a T-nut is, that's what a T-nut is, and it just replaces it with a metal thread and it grabs onto the back. I don't have screws. Normally I would just press them in with a screw, but I didn't have the screws. I didn't feel like going out and getting them, so I'm just pressing them in with a clamp. So I'm just going to squeeze the piss out of them and push them into place. And it ends up working just as well. And if you're worried about your T-nuts falling out, sometimes they do, you can put a flathead screw behind them on the side, and it'll keep them there for life. And voila, here we are, the finalized cabinet. Let me know what you think. Hey, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, ask any questions you have below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.